Welcome to Is It the Podcast? From Rembrandt to Rubens, from Van Dyck to Van Eyck, each episode examines an artwork with an uncertain authorship, in dialogue with a leading guest expert. We'll tell the story of the artist we suspect created the work, of the work in question, and then we reveal the results of a cutting-edge AI authentication analysis performed by the Swiss firm Art Recognition. I'm your host, Professor Noah Charney. So, is it? Most episodes of this podcast will feature a special guest art expert who chooses a painting that they'd like to have analyzed, a painting with uncertain or debated authorship. We are joined by an AI specialist who reveals the test results and we discuss them together. But here and there we'll include an interview that is relevant to the topic of art authentication, art historical mysteries, and technologies like AI, but which steps outside of the usual format. This is one such episode. In it, I'll be interviewing one of the founders of Art Recognition, the firm that sponsors this podcast and runs the AI image analysis tests, Carina Popovici. I wrote a feature in the art newspaper in December 2024 about how its analysis of the Polish writer had solved a long-standing mystery. That was the subject of our previous episode, where my guest was Blake Gopnik. I was intrigued to learn more about AI and art analysis and about Art Recognition in particular, which was the firm that most impressed me within this relatively young field. Many months and much research later, I was sufficiently impressed that I agreed to join Art Recognition as an advisor. This podcast series grew out of that relationship and the many mysteries it was solving. Because we're not only going to reveal a very big breaking news story that came from a combination of traditional research and AI analysis in the next episode, we've got quite a few big news reveals planned for this season and next, so stay tuned. But first, let's get to know the woman behind Art Recognition. Carina Popovici is the co-founder and CEO of Art Recognition, a Swiss company that uses artificial intelligence to authenticate artworks. With a PhD in theoretical physics, Carina started her career in finance and risk analysis before turning her attention to the art world. In 2019, she launched Art Recognition to bring objectivity and transparency to art authentication, a field long plagued by guesswork, conflicting opinions, and high-stakes disputes. Her AI-driven system analyzes an artist's unique visual patterns, like brushstrokes and composition, and compares them to verified works to assess authenticity. Carina's work sits at the intersection of science and art. She's passionate about using technology to protect cultural heritage, expose forgeries, and empower collectors, museums, and auction houses with data-backed insights. Under her leadership, Art Recognition has become a leading voice in the global conversation about how artificial intelligence is reshaping the future of the art world. And I'm delighted that she is my guest today. Carina, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us. I know you are super busy with all of the exciting activities in which Art Recognition is involved. When we get started, I'd love to hear how you first got the idea for Art Recognition.
Thanks a lot for having me. And it's a pleasure talking to you, Noah, as always. Starting an AI art authentication company might not seem like the most obvious career choice. And what triggered that decision was reading about the Beltraki forgery scandal. That's already quite old now, so I think it broke out in 2014-15. For decades, he fooled the entire art world, the leading experts, everybody. And that story made me realize that there was a serious problem, and indeed the art world needed stronger tools and mechanisms to verify the authenticity. And so for me, the most obvious solution was a computer program. And that realization, it was really quite spontaneous. Why nobody has thought about it before, but for what's worth, I thought about it first, but that realization also came with a sense of responsibility. Like if I could see the problem and also the solution, why wait, for someone else to do it? And that's how it started.
So you're reading about the Beltraki case. And when you're reading about it, you thought, well, maybe computers could help. Or did you immediately think that some sort of artificial intelligence program was the way forward?
Well, I can't really say that it was a special moment like Beltraki or walking into a museum or anything to make me realize that yes, AI can make an impact. I could also not have known exactly how AI would evolve over time. So I think the idea really developed gradually from like a spark into like looking around and understanding what was going on and converting it into a real product. So it was a process, but I do think that, this idea was a few years ahead of time. I had a good intuition that proved right, because today we just have to look around to see how AI is changing our lives. And of course, the art world cannot be an exception.
Carina, let's go back in time a little bit. Your background is not in the arts, but in physics and quantitative finance, and it sounds very complicated, and my brain is too small to wrap my head around these things. But what did you start studying? And then how did that transition into things like machine learning and art?
Yeah, as you are saying, I'm a physicist by education. I had already made a big career change by shifting to quantitative finance. But again, I'm very passionate about art. And at first I had to teach myself a lot about AI. There weren't that many courses. I remember I was following the online courses from Stanford, I think. So combining that passion with my technical expertise that I had accumulated throughout my previous jobs felt like the right thing to do. What I love most about my work is really this challenge, bringing together two seemingly incompatible worlds, but not just that, but also turning it into a product that is useful on the market, but also reflects my own personal values of fairness, trust, technical innovation, of course, and also building an organization and also bringing together a team that shares that vision. And so what we've achieved together so far is really incredibly rewarding. And we will, of course, continue to move forward.
So before we get into some of the stories of success, you mentioned building a team. And for a relatively new field, or rather application of AI to art, what sort of a team did you build and how did you find them? And what sort of team skills did you need in putting together art recognition?
Yeah, so in the first couple of years, actually, I was very focused on the AI side. So I've started with hiring AI developers in the team. So as we developed the technology, we realized that that technology cannot work properly or cannot work at all, even without the art historical expertise. And so we've started bringing more art historians on board. But it's not been straightforward to bring together experts coming from such different fields and help them, understand the views and problems even of the others, like how does AI look like from the lens of an art historian and vice versa. So this has been a process as well, building the team. And today we have like a really, really good team of people that understand each other well and work together well. So this is also incredibly rewarding.
I'm glad you said that, because as an art historian who has written about AI, I often need to have things explained to me that would be completely self-evident to someone who was familiar with the computer technology side of things. And for audience members listening who have no idea how this system works, can you walk us through how art recognition's system functions from, the image input to the final authenticity result step by step?
Yes, absolutely. So as every AI application, it begins with the data. For our application, we need images of authentic and not authentic artwork. So these are our data sets. So we actually have two data sets, one of positive, one of negative examples that are being fed into the system. The positive examples, they are photographs of authentic artworks by the artists that we are training on that are cross-referenced with the catalog raisonnés. So very important, I like to highlight this, that there is always the art historical background, which is encapsulated in those books. And our negative data sets are also compiled by art historians who need to find the artists that, for example, admired a certain artist that we're just training on and imitated him, also his teachers, also the anonymous artists that created during the same period that are not so well known today, also modern imitations. So finding all these negative examples with a high degree of similarity, as we say, is like a project in its own. So creating a data set is literally months of research. But the good news is that you need to do it just once, like when a training data set is done, then you can just shelve it and then use it whenever you need it for a training. So that's really good. And so that's the data sets, which is like the longest part of the pipeline. And once they are done, then everything goes quickly. Like we feed the images into the AI, then the AI learns from those images. On the one hand, what are the unique features of an artist, but also what distinguishes, for example, an authentic work from a very good copy. And once the training is completed, then the AI compares these learned features with those identified on a new art piece that is submitted to us by someone. And based on this comparison, it calculates a probability that the submitted artwork is by the hand of the trained artist. So that's the easy description.
What are some of the elements that your AI will look for? I can imagine things like brushstroke or the way an artist handles an ear or another aspect of its figures, its palette. What are some of the categories that your AI is considering?
The AI learns on different levels. What we're doing, we are actually dividing the images in smaller patches, and we do that at different scales. So that at one scale, we zoom in and then the AI learns, for example, the fine details like the eyes, for example, in a portrait or the leaves in a tree. And then you go one step back. And then from the next set of patches, the AI would learn the entire head, the entire portrait or the entire tree. And then you go one step back and then it would learn like some compositional elements or full objects. So that's the process, that's how the AI learns.
So what about the extent of data that you need? Because I imagine different artists have very different numbers of works that are extant. How much data do you need to train the system on a particular artist? And what are the difficulties you face if there's a smaller data set to begin with?
I can't really give a single number because there isn't like a one size fits all kind of thing, when it comes to training data set. Our goal is always to build complete data sets. So what we mean by this is that we always aim to compile all the validated works by a given artist and cross-reference them with the catalog raisonné. And having said that, the size can vary a lot. For some artists, there might be around 50 images. For others, there might be thousands. But what's really important is to have all the images, because if we're missing images from the training data set, then we don't know how the model would have trained with those images. And of course, in some cases, they've been destroyed, burned or something. I mean, we might be missing images every once in a while because they just don't exist anymore, like those paintings. But that's the general rule, to have the complete data sets. And well, when data sets are small, this could become slightly technical. So I'll try to explain that a bit. So there is a thing called data augmentation. What that means is that we're creating variations of the data that we already have so that the model can learn more than what's directly in the training data set. So I've been talking about, for example, splitting the images into patches at different scales. So that's already like technically a data augmentation strategy. But we also apply like other types of augmentation. So like the geometric augmentation, for example, we flip the images, rotate, mirror them, so that the model sees them from different angles, for example, and learns to generalize a bit better. We also use like color and lighting augmentation. So like we adjust the brightness, contrast, tone. So we are trying to simulate, photos as if they were taken with different cameras or under different light conditions and so on. So these are all things that we are doing in order to help the model, to learn better from the training data sets that we have.
At this point, maybe it would be easiest and most fun if you would give us a success story. Any one that you like from the projects that you've worked on, maybe preferably one that has a surprise involved in the findings. and then walk us through how art recognition did the analysis.
This is a tricky question, actually. I can't talk about it a lot because it's not public yet.
Okay.
So about 3 years ago, we reached out to the museum and let them know that according to our AI authenticity analysis, an old master painting that they have might not be authentic. As you can imagine, starting that conversation wasn't easy. And the discussion themselves weren't easy as well. But in the end, and this is really quite recent, all the evidence that we have presented to them and also the work that we've done on this specific painting actually convinced them to reconsider their position. And there's going to be an official announcement later this year, actually. So our listeners should definitely stay tuned. And then the details will also be disclosed of that story. It took a very long time. As I say, it took 3 years or even longer, but it was worth it. So that's definitely a success story, although it sounds a bit mysterious still.
It does. It sounds like some sort of secret agent story, but you often have to do this, right? Because it can potentially be an awkward conversation. Sometimes you bring good news, like you authenticate a work that the owner or institution thought was less exciting than it turns out to be. And it can go in the other direction as well, too, which leads to my next question. So for cases with very high profile artists like a Rembrandt or a Raphael, how do you handle the pressures, whether they're political or financial, that can surround your verdicts? Because, at this point, I sometimes think of AI analysis as like DNA evidence in a cold case. And it's a case that might have been considered a long time ago. You could have even maybe a 19th century court case that was decided in a very different way back then. And then if DNA evidence, which when it was first introduced was cutting edge and high tech the way AI is when related to art now, it can encourage people to reconsider things that they thought were open and shut cases, or at least were definitively answered. And people, human beings in general, we don't like to admit that we were wrong, and we can be quite stubborn, especially the more degrees we have, the more stubborn we can be. So how do you deal with all that?
Absolutely. The best thing that we can do is to really just focus on doing our job. Our pricing model, for example, is very straightforward. We just charge for the service. And the fee that we charge doesn't depend on whether we're analyzing a painting attributed to Raphael or Rembrandt or a less known artist. And I think this kind of protects us from conflicts of interest because, sometimes we have really received images coming along with proposals for a sales commission. So we always decline those. We don't want that there is like any suspicion that the financial motivation would push us towards a certain answer. So that's one thing that we are careful about. And for the rest, the public exposure, for example, or the politics around these big cases, things can be more complicated there actually, because we've seen, over the years, we've been making certain cases public. And then suddenly, like a lot of people had strong opinions about our work. And we've had to deal with situations where we've been called, attention seekers, dilettantes who don't know what they're doing, all kinds of things, So some of these remarks are quite hurtful, actually, when you know that you're doing the right thing, and being very diligent and scientific and everything. But again, there is a lesson in it, So over time, we learn to protect ourselves, like in how to interact with the media, for example, and not to let all the negative comments stand in our way. So our response to this kind of pressure is really to be like super professional and super factual. And then things turn out well in general.
This links to what we were talking about before about human opinions. And of course, people love to weigh in with opinions about things they don't really know about as well. That's either they think they know everything about it or they know nothing about it, but want to share their opinion anyway. But there's a quote from you that I found in a past article that you said something like, AI brings objectivity to an otherwise subjective process. And I certainly know what you mean, but maybe for the listeners, can you elaborate on that and how AI can help where art authentication was once the realm of connoisseurs and was much less transparent?
This is a very, very important point, actually, and I'm glad you're mentioning, because you are, of course, absolutely right. Traditionally, art has been the realm of connoisseurs, and I don't think, that the way AI and human works experts work is all that far apart, at least conceptually. Like a human expert, what they would do, they would study books, literature, learn the artist styles, recurring motifs and all of these things. And the AI does something quite similar, actually. It also learns from examples, but it does it differently. I mean, first of all, much faster. And secondly, it might also pick up motives, patterns, things that might not be obvious to a human. So in a way, the approach is about the same, but there is one key distinctions. And that's what I meant, in this quote that you had digged out of somewhere. So the difference, in my opinion, is that experts, they also inherently bring emotions into the process. Maybe there is a sense of excitement when they see a new work, maybe there is certain expectations. I mean, there is this element of subjectivity that's very uniquely human and that can't be eliminated. And the AI, on the other hand, is purely objective. Like, it doesn't have any of this. And that's where the difference lies, in my opinion, this element of human subjectivity versus the objectivity of the machine.
I think the key point really is that AI is just the latest and most cutting edge of the tools available for human experts. And it's not something that should replace them, but it should be an additional tool in their arsenal. So we've had connoisseurship. We had the addition of, there was a time when photographs of works of art and studying a photograph was considered quite cutting edge. And is that going to ruin things? Then we, of course, have forensic material analysis. We have multispectral lighting. And each one, I think, made traditionalists nervous. And then now they've been seamlessly woven into the array of options that experts have to try to, in a more objective and definitive way, come to a conclusion. With that in mind, I think the concern of traditionalists is that AI is going to somehow bump them out of their position, and then the world will over rely on AI alone. And could you talk to that? I understand that that's not really a concern, but I can also see how someone who's feeling a bit conservative and defensive might be worried that it is.
Yes, no, I totally understand what you mean. And of course, we don't want to bump anybody out of the way. I mean, we were talking, earlier during our conversation about the basis, the foundation of the data set. So that's the catalog raisonnés that are being created by experts. So, this wealth of knowledge is the foundation, lays at the core of what we do. So that's very, very important, for the experts to realize that everything starts with their expertise. We are trying to be as inclusive as possible. I mean, we sense, of course, that there is the fear element, and I'm really using every opportunity to explain to them that we're not their enemies. We are really there to help, like, very, very genuinely. And I truly hope, and some experts, they have already started doing this, to use our results and include them into their own work. So I think it will be useful that both sides are open towards each other and converging towards a collaboration instead of being enemies forever. Now, about the over-reliance, I think that's another good point, actually, because, there is still a bit of this, mystical view of AI, like some kind of supernatural power. And that might scare the experts, certainly, but also like the general public, like the art enthusiasts. And I think this can actually lead in both directions, So either, as you are saying, people rely on it too much, or they mistrust it completely. We don't understand what it does, so we stay away from it. And what we are doing actually is to be really as precise as possible. So not only in what we do, but also in how we explain what we do. I think that if people understand correctly how the AI works, the importance of the data set, the curation of the data sets, the collaboration with the experts, all of these building blocks, if we communicate this properly, then the risk of either over-reliance or mistrust is automatically reduced.
That sounds like a perfect answer. And we also, the way you described it, you are training the AI through catalog raisonné initially, and that is a human developed tool, usually over, at this point with old masters, over many generations with multiple art historians weighing in and deciding. So you're basing it on human research, and then it becomes a tool for human analysis because once you have the results, they need to be interpreted. And, part of the theme of this podcast is, okay, we have these exciting results from your analysis, but then how do we understand them in the context of what we already knew or thought we knew, and in the context of the oeuvre of the artist in question? So the human is throughout at all points along the path. So nothing to worry about.
Absolutely.
There's another twist to what you're doing, and I understand that you are considering the role of multispectral imaging, like infrared, X-ray, and ultraviolet, in your analysis. How does that work? Whereas AI, as we know it, is just looking at the surface of what we see in a painting.
Yeah, actually, we've started using infrared and X-ray pictures already, but quite recently, in fact. And the reason is of a practical nature, so to speak. Namely that, this kind of data is mostly very difficult to get. For normal images, there are like repositories in the internet. There are databases where you can just download images, and that doesn't exist for these types of images. These images are incredibly valuable because exactly as you are saying, like X-ray, infrared imaging allows us and allows the AI to see beneath the surface of a painting. They can learn, so the models, they can learn from the underdrawings that become visible under certain wavelengths, or from the pentimenti, these changes that the artist made during the creative process. Of all of these things, they give a much deeper understanding to the machines, and they also lead to more precise results. And actually, I'd like to add another teaser to this conversation. So not too long ago, we have actually launched a collaboration with Maurizio Serracini, the world's leading forensic art experts. And indeed, one of our shared goals is to combine his expertise in looking beneath the surface with the power of our AI technology. So our listeners should stay tuned on that as well.
Now that is super powerful, and that's a very big deal, because if AI is used to looking at just the surface, if all of a sudden you can compare, for example, what an infrared spectrogram of every Caravaggio painting looks like, and you can have the AI compare that to an infrared spectrogram of the painting in question, that's deeper, quite literally, than anything anyone's been able to do before. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
So last couple of questions for you, Carina, and then I'm going to let you get back to all of the exciting research you have. Okay, AI is very rapidly advancing. But at the moment, as we're speaking now, what are some of the limitations of AI in art analysis that you could imagine overcoming in the not so distant future?
So one thing that we don't have yet, but are actually actively working on, is the use of textual information. Because right now, as we've been discussing, our AI learns only from images. It learns from the visible images, and now it started learning from X-rays, infrared. But there is actually a huge amount of knowledge in the books themselves, details about, an artist's life, some events that influenced their career, people that they admired, all of these things. And this information is actually extremely valuable. And we're currently developing an artificial intelligence model based on textual information that can take this kind of information into account and then combine it with the image analysis to make it even more powerful and to deliver results that are even more precise and more detailed. So this is something that we don't have, but we'll have rather soon.
Can you imagine a future, or has it already taken place, where someone tried to make a forgery that was designed to fool AI systems? Or is it too early days for people to be playing around with that?
Actually, that already happened. We're very aware of the trend, even the AI-made forgeries that are designed to trick everything, including the AI authentication systems. Well, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. there as well. So what we've done was to start creating this kind of images ourselves. So we have a separate Gen AI software, or one can even get them, nowadays from ChatGPT or from commercial software. So get digital images in the style of an artist created by a Gen AI, and then feed them into the predictive, so into the authentication AI as negative examples.
That's very clever. People have too much time in their hands, and they're always going to come up with some way to move forward, but it's good that you're anticipating that.
You'd be surprised.
So, okay, last question for you, Carina. What would you say to young scientists who want to bring AI into the humanities or the arts now that you've made initial ventures into art image analysis? What about people who want to bring it into other arts or humanities?
I do believe that the intersection of art and AI holds an incredible potential, not just in terms of what we're doing, which is authenticating art, but also Gen AI that we've talked about, and that can be used to create beautiful things and not just digital forgeries. And surely there are applications that maybe we don't even know about right now as we speak. Maybe younger people will develop this in the following months or years. So I certainly encourage younger colleagues, and in fact, anyone that's passionate about this space, to take the step. And I do believe that every contribution can truly enrich the art world and make it even more interesting.
Well, your contribution has already been very impressive, and we look forward to following your further adventures. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and explain all this to our audience.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Now that you've gotten to know Carina, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more fascinating discussions and even more shocking revelations about paintings for which we ask the question, is it? Then we answer it with a combination of traditional research and cutting-edge AI image analysis. Thanks for listening to Is It? The podcast. This series is produced by Urshka Charney, presented by Noah Charney, and is brought to you by Art Recognition. Based in Zurich, Art Recognition is the leading firm for AI-driven authentication of artworks. Featured everywhere from the art newspaper to Wired to The Guardian and beyond, Art Recognition uses the most definitive, sophisticated datasets and advanced processes to estimate the likelihood that a specific artist created an artwork. Backed by a multidisciplinary team that takes many dimensions of research into consideration, Art Recognition has a long track record of success at the highest level. Learn more at art-recognition.com. That's art-recognition.com. We'll be back next time with a new art historical mystery, a new possible artist behind the masterpiece, and a new guest expert. See you next time.